Good morning. So I told you Peter and I would be here at 10 a.m. and it is 10. It is the day before Easter. And although this is not the Easter bunny, bunnies have lots of relatives, and I believe that Peter Rabbit and the Easter bunny might be related somehow. So we're just going to wait a second until we get some more folks to come on here and join us. And I'm going to show you a really cool book, and we'll talk about the story of Peter Rabbit. So I have this book. It's called Beatrix Potter, a Journal, and I've talked about this book a couple of times. It's a really cool book. And maybe you've got books at home that you like to read with your mom or dad or your brothers or sisters, or maybe you read to your stuffed animals. I know kids that like to read to their stuffed animals. And you might have a favorite book. I like this book because it's got all kinds of surprises inside. So this book is the journal, pieces of the journal of Beatrix Potter, who was the author of Peter Rabbit. So Beatrix Potter, I chose her because it's been a tradition of ours to read Peter Rabbit every year around Easter. And she's also, as an author, she had a very different way of being educated. So she did not actually attend a public school. She didn't leave her home to go to school. She had what they called governesses, and they came in and they taught her at home, like you're being taught right now at home. So I thought that was a good connection for you guys to have. So as an author and someone who didn't go to school, she hung out with her brother a lot. His name was Beatrix. And they would watch all the animals in their yard. They had a big yard, and she would watch them, and she would watch their habits, and she'd watch how they played together. And she really liked to draw them. And she liked to draw flowers, and she liked to draw a lot of things that she saw outside. And that became something that was really a love of hers. She became very, very good at it. And in a time when women didn't really work, they didn't make their own money, she became a published author. And she had her own publishing company because she was actually turned away. She brought her stories and her drawings to some publishers, and they turned her away. So she decided that she was going to publish her own stories. And she became a very well-known author. This Peter Rabbit was written close to 100 years ago, maybe even a little bit more. And so we're still reading it. We're still enjoying her pictures, her illustrations. We're still enjoying her stories. She just didn't let anyone tell her no. She decided that this is what she wanted to do. She knew she was good at it, and she was going to find a way to make a living at it. She was also one of the first authors to ever have merchandising on her things. So if you are a Disney fan and you like Mickey Mouse, or you like Winnie the Pooh, or you like one of the princesses, and you go to the store after you've read the books or seen the movie, and you can buy the princess dress, or you can buy Winnie the Pooh toys, that's called merchandising. And she was one of the first people to do that, to take her stories and actually create things like a little Peter Rabbit that you could take home with you and sell them to go along with her stories. So she was what we would call now an entrepreneur. She was on her own, doing her own things. So this book is really cool. And someone brought it to my attention that when I bring this up to you, the words will be backwards, but a lot of this is in cursive, so I don't think you'll be able to tell anyway. So here's her journal. She's got pictures of her family members. Can you stay? And then she's got pictures of some of the things that she liked to draw. See the bunny. Not everything's cute and cuddly, but she liked to draw a lot of different kinds of animals. She actually became sort of a scientist when it came to drawing them. She would know how to draw their bone structure underneath their fur or their skin. Some more pictures of her family. See, it's a very interactive book. And I like books that you can touch and open things and explore. She's got pictures of people that were important during her time. She's got pictures of bats. Can you see the bats? She would draw them in all different ways until she got it exactly right how to draw the wings. See that's actually a picture of her painting supplies. Do yours look that messy? If they're that messy, that means you're painting a lot. Here's a little card that she once, this is one of her first things that she sold. It's a little greeting card. happy Christmas to you. You see in here? Now there's a surprise under this. Look. What do you see? Are those guinea pigs? See this? I bet you have a book like this at home that's a little pop-up book. She's got a letter in here that she sent to somebody. Have you been writing letters to people that you might miss while you're in isolation? All kinds of things. But way in the back is another one of her colored illustrations. All the pretty colors. She was very particular about the way that her pictures were printed and the colors that they used. Now, way in the back of this book, you see this little secret panel? And there it is. The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Now, hold it up so that you can see the pictures. Peter, do you want to come sit with me while I tell the story? All right, Peter's going to join us for the story. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. You see all the bunnies? See the little bunnies? Now, my dears, said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. See, she's telling her children, I'm going out, you can go play, but you have to obey the rules and you can only go this far. Don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had a terrible accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. That wasn't very nice. Now, run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out. So she's putting on their little coats. She's telling them to be good, go play, but be good. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Do you know what currants are? They're kind of like raisins. Have you ever had brown bread? Brown bread? A lot of people like to have brown bread with baked beans and hot dogs. It's like a molasses bread. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. We don't have blackberries yet. It's still a little too cold, but they'll be coming in a couple of months. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden. Isn't that where his mom told him not to go? She told him he'd go out to play. He could go wherever he wanted, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Well, Peter is naughty. Off he goes, right where he's not supposed to be, and squeezed under the gate. If there's a gate or a fence, it's probably there for a reason, and you shouldn't try to squeeze underneath it or go around it or over it. First, he ate some lettuce and some broad beans. He went to someone else's yard and he started eating their stuff. And then he ate some radishes. Have you ever had a radish? They're red on the outside, they're white on the inside, and they're kind of hot. They're spicy, like peppery. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. So parsley is an herb, and it can ease your stomach if you've got a stomach ache. But round the end of the cucumber frame, who should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Doesn't sound very good. Peter might be in some trouble. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages. He jumped up and he ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter shouldn't have been there, huh? He shouldn't have been in Mr. McGregor's garden taking his things. Peter was more dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, and he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages. I have a feeling his mom is going to be very unhappy that he lost a shoe. and the other among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether pretty fast. Bunnies are pretty fast because they run on all 4 legs. If he had not unfortunately run into the gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Not today. Today he's got a little red coat on. He's all dressed up for you today. This is his special coat. And a gooseberry net is a net that people will put over their berries so that the birds don't eat all of them and the animals don't get into them. Peter did not do a good job going around the net. Peter gave himself up for lost and cried big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Do you know what that means? Exert yourself, put more effort into it. Come on, Peter, you can do it. Put more effort into it. You can get free. So they were sort of cheering him on, telling him to get loose. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop on top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind. So that's a sieve. You might call it a strainer. Similar. They're similar. See, he's trying to catch him. But Peter, so fast. And rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not been filled with so much water. Little tail sticking out of the can. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking underneath each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Ker-choo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. His sneeze gave him away, huh? Do you ever try to hide somewhere and be really, really quiet and you sneeze? Or for me, I'm terrible at hiding because I would giggle. I would always giggle and my laugh would get me found out. And tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter, so he went back to his work. Peter made a terrible mess. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. He had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in that can. I bet that wasn't very comfortable to be all wet like that. And his mom had put a jacket on him, so it was probably cold out too, so now probably he's cold and wet. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. She said you were fat. It wasn't me. An old mouse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. He got himself into quite a mess, hasn't he? He's cold, he's wet, he's lost, he can't get home. Should have listened to his mom. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. There surely never was such a garden for cabbages, hundreds and hundreds of them, and Peter was not tall enough to see over them and felt too sick to eat them. It was just like a very bad dream. Look at all the cabbages. You know what cabbages are, right? They look like lettuce, but they're a little bit... The ball of the cabbage is harder than lettuce. In the middle of the garden, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it was best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. Do you ever see a cat sitting very still and their tail twitches? Usually they're concentrating on something, or something's just annoyed them or bothered them. He went back towards the tool shed again, but suddenly there was a most peculiar noise. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scurried underneath the bushes. Then someone began to sing, "Three blind mice, three blind mice." Do you know that song? Can you sing that song? It sounded disagreeable to Peter. It made him feel as though his own tail were going to be cut off. His fur stood on end. He's scared now. He's hiding. I feel bad for Peter. Got himself into this mess, but I still feel bad for Peter. After a time, as nothing happened, Peter came out and climbed upon the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Do you know what a hoe is? It's like a little flat shovel, and it breaks up the ground so you can plant things. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along the straight walk behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the outside of the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Now he's going home without shoes or a jacket. See? And he's cold, and he's wet, and he has an upset belly. Not a good day for Peter. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. Can you see that tree and his little home underneath it? Burrowed underneath the tree to live. You look around your yard, you see holes there sometimes. Think about the animals that might live there. He was so tired that he flopped down upon a nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes Peter had lost in a fortnight. You see? He's asleep behind his mom. I don't think she'd be very happy if she knew what kind of day he had. It was really most provoking for Peter's mother because she had not very much money to spend upon new clothes. She earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffet tees. I think those are the things that you put your hands in to keep your hands warm. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. See, she's knitting away, she's doing her work, she's making money to feed her family. She also had a little field in which she grew herbs and rabbit tobacco. This is what we call lavender. She hung it up to dry in the kitchen in bunches, which she sold for a penny apiece to her rabbit neighbors in the warren. The warren is where the rabbits all lay. You ever seen lavender? Lavender's purple. It's little purple flowers and it smells very pretty. Did you ever happen to see a little old buck rabbit enjoying a pipe of rabbit tobacco? Have you ever seen a rabbit smoking a pipe? I haven't. Apparently Beatrix has because she drew it. I am very sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening in consequence of having eaten too much in Mr. McGregor's garden. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea. And she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. Look at all the other bunnies is looking on. They're worried about Peter. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. That sounds really good. So what did Peter get at the end of the day? He got an upset belly and some chamomile tea. They got, because they behaved themselves and they came home, they did what they were supposed to do. They had bread and milk and blackberries. And that is the end of the story. Peter Rabbit. So I hope you enjoyed it. Peter says he hopes you enjoyed it too. Tell me if you write underneath and tell me what stories you like to read, or what you like to read with your brothers and sisters, or if you read to your stuffed animals, or if you've heard Peter Rabbit's story before, or if you have I know he became very famous lately because there was a movie about him, right? Yep. So I hope that you have a great weekend. Don't be like Peter. Peter got into a lot of trouble, and he was very lucky that he got home safely, even though he did have an upset belly. Listen to your mom and dad. Do the right things, and then you'll be rewarded like Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. All right? I hope everybody has a very blessed Easter. Be well, be cautious, and take care of one another.